Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again. I'm Nushit, and I'll be your host for today's episode of MCT Space Talks. Our topic for today is a recurring one, which is the public spaces in Muscat during the outbreak of COVID-19. The virus has halted our everyday routines and sometimes almost in its entirety. Muscat witnessed its first case in early March 2020. Since then, there has been many attempts by the government to curb the rapid spread. Restrictions were put in place, we had lockdowns, and public interactions were minimized. And finally, 10 months later, the regulations have finally eased. Recently, the government has reopened the access to the public spaces in the city. Please join me as we reflect on how these public spaces have emerged during this COVID era. And firstly, let's introduce our panel members. We have Dr. Alya Al Hashim, who is an assistant professor in the College of Civil and Architectural Engineering at Sultan Qaboos University. Previously, Dr. Alya worked on documenting old settlements in Oman. It was funded by the Ministry of Culture and Heritage. She also recently completed her PhD from Georgia University of Technology in High Performance Building Program. Next, we have Nasser, who's a graduate of the German University of Technology, and he holds a master's in urban and regional development from Cardiff University. He's currently working with Khatib al Alami as an urban and regional planner. He was also involved in the Oman Rail project, new airport cargo projects, and the Oman National Strategy project. And finally, we have Shehla Hussain, who is an architect and planner with key expertise in design research. Her experience spans over 10 years across USA, India, and Oman. Shehla is currently working with Norplan AS. In 2019, her experiences in the city led her to co-found Oman Think Urban, bringing together multidisciplinary urbanists in town to explore, process, engage with communities, and truly participate in their local and regional planning initiatives which affect their built environment. Thank you everyone for joining me today. And now let's start. So I will be reading out these statements, and if you agree with these statements, raise your hands, and if you disagree, well, then we know. So my first statement for today is, I used to be a regular user of public spaces in Muscat before COVID-19 lockdown began. Okay, Shehla, I'll let you start. All right. Shehla, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that using public spaces is the main, recreation, frankly. So I was an avid user of public space, and possibly it's hard to define what is meant to be like the definitive version of a public space, but anything outside of the house or the private premises was pretty much, I had to, with kids and, with work life and everything, you really need to get out and mingle with the world around you.
Yeah, so it's a great source of interaction. Nasser, tell us your experience in this regard.
Yeah, actually, for me, it's very hard thing to say if I am a regular user or not, but it depends on where are you living in Muscat, I think, because the public spaces in Muscat, it differs from one area to the other. Like if I am somewhere in a Shati region, so I think there are better open spaces than living somewhere like in Al Amirat or somewhere like in Ma'bela. It's developing now. I'm not saying it's not like the same, but you can see the difference in quality of those open spaces and how people are more interacting with these open spaces.
True, so, it's actually changing with the times. I would agree that compared to when we were kids and today. All right, I'll move on to my next statement. With the public spaces shut, the remainder of the city was used for recreation. To what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement? Alya, yes, please.
Well, I do agree with this statement. I do feel that once the public spaces got shut down, people started opening their eyes that to areas that were not considered recreation. but they assume there will be less people there, so less risk of the COVID, and they started exploring these areas much more, especially the wadi areas that were almost neglected. Only the adventurous people used to go there. Now it has become almost like a regular. Every weekend you would hear most of your relatives and family members are going there. So it kind of hidden places came up and got named as public spaces. Things that were not considered as our usual terminology of public spaces are starting to get into this umbrella or under this terminology. So it's very interesting to see that, I would say.
Yeah, that's very true. I think a lot of spaces, I mean, all unused spaces somehow became accessible to public. And I think there was also the fear of not, trying to avoid crowded spaces. Shehla, Nasser, what's your experience in this regard?
Yeah, I think I am agreeing with the statement, especially when you put restrictions on people. They will find out a solution for themselves to use a public space or to create space for themselves to do their activities. We can clearly saw during the pandemic how people used every small element in their neighborhoods for sports. Or I never seen that amount of people doing sports at least on my neighborhood, like I have seen in the COVID-19 period. So they have moved. I think people were using public spaces elsewhere, but because those spaces were locked, so they started to use their own spaces or closed by spaces to do their activity.
Yeah,
I agree. Actually, definitely the definition of public space got really broadened, and I think on an individual level, people really started to think about, the usual. It would be like malls or something like that, but then it started becoming, where are these open spaces? How can I get to them? And even
I think the
us as
residents
a family,
adapted to the restrictions and found their own havens of spaces around, I think.
Yeah,
That's been actually a very interesting thing that's been happening. I think it's all over the world now. Everyone's found, and especially for instance during this time, gardening became a really huge thing, especially terrace gardening. Everyone, if they had a little window of space, there was a lot of that going on. Everyone's Instagrams were filled with that. That was really cool actually during this time. So the next statement, during the pandemic, traveling by car was the safest way of being outdoors. What do you think?
I strongly agree with that.
So have you, would you, on a personal level, how strongly were you able to follow this or keep to this safety level?
Is it the question for me or for Shehla?
For every one of you. For
everyone. Okay.
So I feel like the car was considered or is still considered the safest mode of traveling because of the amount of exposure you are having with other people with the air is much less than what you would do while walking or other modes or by being with other people in the same space. But there is one more thing that came up is the routes that the car started taking. Now, you see, now the car, going into the car was the only breather for people to go out and just see anything, see parts of the cities. So the routes that were less taken, the ones with the views, the ones that had more to offer, became more used. And people started using the traveling by car as a recreation rather than a mundane thing. So instead of choosing the shortest route to get to a destination, now destination less driving started happening because they would take their kids and start exploring the Muscat area. The less traveled road started getting explored. So that was an interesting thing that started happening in this pandemic. I would say an aimless driving. That would be aimless in terms of there is no destination that you're ending up to, but just trying to look through your window and just experiencing the fact that you are outside, just giving yourself that relief that you are outside. So I'd say that happened this time.
True. It's been a big breather just to be able to, because I remember seeing on these moms group women just asking, is it allowed to just take my kids out in the car? Is that okay? And yeah, I think everyone was just looking for a way to get out and experience outdoors once again, be it through car windows.
Yeah,
So,
and you don't have to wear your masks that much or worry about wearing a mask or not in the car, with kids especially who don't want to wear masks. So definitely it was easier.
True. Especially, yes, with younger kids. And I mean, they say that below 2 you don't need to wear mask, but above 2 you need to. And obviously they're still so young, they don't want to. And yeah, that's been a big challenge with a lot of moms in the city. I've seen that too. So the next statement is, during the pandemic, the digital or the virtual space was a good replacement for a public space.
I disagree with that.
Okay, let us hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah. For the virtual reality, I think there is it's my vision for or my understanding for the virtual reality. It's like a nice dream you are dreaming of, but since you are going out of it, you will feel the quality of the space you are living in. So I think the virtual reality has I think it was a great invention for us, for meetings and to do our work and many other activities, but I don't think they can replace a space that a physical space that we are using. Because
so basically you mean not a good alternative for recreation space, basically.
Exactly, because the open spaces that we have, it gives us a quality of living. It gives us a feeling of even if it's in a small neighborhood, at the end you will realize something, you will remember something somewhere there, and you relate yourself to it, but not in the virtual reality. I think it's a good invention for work or to accomplish some tasks, but it will never replace a real physical open space, on my point of view, of course.
True. What do you ladies have to say to that?
Well, I would also disagree with the statement that the virtual space could never replace an actual space. That it is not equivalent at all. It is very convenient. Functional wise, you can do a lot of things with the virtual space. That is true. But as humans, we have this need, and this need of a space of interaction, of just being outside of the walls, is something that I don't think any virtual software, even if it got really really sophisticated, it can imitate the outside world. I still think it will never replace it. The open spaces will always hold their importance, in my opinion.
I think just to add to that, I think there was this other parallel thing of just in social interaction that at least could be ongoing. I mean, I totally disagree that it can replace public spaces, just as other speakers rightly pointed out. But I do feel like because of technology, in a time when there would be no technology and such pandemics hit, I can't imagine how difficult it might have been to even realize what is happening with the general public. So during the pandemic time, having a digital alternative actually made us feel like we could relate with one another, even the fears, anxieties, everything. We all know and can quite surely say how other people would be feeling, because we were able to read about it or learn about it. So I think that way digital platforms helped in the interactions that happen in public spaces. Maybe the physical spaces and the senses that get activated were not really replicated, but the function of interaction, I think, definitely got extended.
Yeah, but I think also the function of, I mean, the interaction part sort of in that case like happened with very close friends and family, right? Whereas in a space, I guess you'd meet any random person and you'd
Yeah,
probably,
you can't just run into someone. That's true.
yeah, you definitely didn't. I mean, introverts and extroverts each has their liking to this, but yeah, I think there was another part of virtual interactions. But yeah, as Nasser mentioned, it has been a great help during COVID time, especially when it comes to work and keeping the economy and the country running. So whereas it did do that part, it hasn't been, I guess, such a great replacement just for human interactions. All right, the next one is the pandemic brought to light the importance of having access to public spaces. Yes, Sheila.
So I definitely agree. I think people really appreciate the fact that there is need for public space. I think they never really thought about it as much. It was just there. But now we really think about and introspect what is public space, how can it be defined, what about all our natural spaces, how valuable have they been, and how much have they been taken care of. And I think all of that has to bring it to the public's mindset. I mean, it's different as planners or designers or people who are learning about these things. But as laymen who may not be, who may be in any other sector, so for them to really have a true understanding of space and spatial qualities, I think that is a really big success. Not, I wouldn't say success, but I would say that is something that has been brought to the forefront during this time.
True. Alya,
I would also,
Yes,
I
please.
would also agree with the statement that it had the pandemic brought light to the access of these public spaces. And there is one more thing that came up. It's like the Instagram spaces, like the spaces or the areas that were hidden that not many people knew about. I felt in the pandemic, people started discovering those spaces, and then once they upload the pictures and these pictures go viral, more and more people start coming to these spaces. So the discovery of these hidden spaces actually started happening with the pandemic and along with the social media. Both together have really helped in bringing spaces that were not considered public spaces or not under the category of commonly known public spaces. They came out, and it's starting to starting as planners. I think it's bringing light to what would we consider the formal public spaces. Now, how can we redesign them and start creating those spaces that that first of all take into consideration this pandemic, the social distancing, and also provide people a place to get together. So this all the pandemic, the social media, all these together have, I think, created some public spaces by itself. This notion has created them, I think.
Nasser, what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, I think the pandemic given us free lessons in planning. If you see the quality of public spaces, we still have, I know the previous session was about, I think, the beaches and
Beaches, yes.
Yeah, still at least in Muscat, I think our natural open spaces still have the favorite, are the favorite places for the people until now from the man-made ones. The people suffered more when the government shut down the beaches and the natural spaces like wadis. They couldn't go to those spaces. So I think still we have a long way to develop our open spaces, so people are willing to use it more often. And this is lesson learned, should be a lesson learned from this pandemic, and how we can develop our planning standards to put our even the man-made open spaces like to be a spaces that people are willing to go and enjoy themselves on those spaces. So this is like maybe one aspect of the importance of open spaces. The other thing also, like I would like to mention, like what is the age group are using those spaces also. Like I think everybody will agree with me that most people who suffered from this pandemic are the kids and the elder people. So like I saw today, like I was coming from Ma'bela to Asib through the coastal road. So I saw even the walkways are full of children. So it was like they unleashed the children from the houses, you know. So
Unleashed is the right word.
yeah. So it was, you know, that brings to us that we need to develop our open spaces also to fit the different age groups, like the youth, the elderly, the kids. So all of them, they can use those small open spaces even nearby their houses or in parks or anywhere. So this is my point of view on this regard.
So in addition, I would just like to ask all of you, so do you consider access to public space as a fundamental human right? Would you consider it as serious as that?
Yes, definitely. I would,
Yes.
in my opinion, it would be like a basic right, because it gives because it impacts a lot on your daily life, on your daily health, in your health, your mental health. It impacts on all these things in different ways. So you are entitled to live a healthy life, both mentally and physically. So the access to public space contributes to that. So it is your right to have an access to open space, definitely.
True. So that's just something, because I think that affects a lot in how the planning goes on. Because I mean, we still have quite a lot of unbuilt spaces around the city, and maybe this would like form a direction before these areas are developed, keeping in mind the demography and the population of an area. We need to urge our planners to think about this and urge the local municipality and the governments to take this into consideration when they're developing new areas, because I think, like you said, it's very important and it's almost vital to your physical and mental health, having access to such areas. And especially, just like Nasser mentioned, we also need to think about catering to different age groups just to keep a healthy balance and keep it inclusive.
I just want to add something to that. Like I feel like the whole system of planning itself, trying to define the way we behave in our spaces very, very specifically is a little bit flawed. And I think we all need to really, as planners, designers, or anybody in the spatial realm has a civic duty, I think, to rethink the way that we think of open and public spaces. They're not like, if you want to go, to recreate, you must go there or there. It's not really the way that people work. They really just use their spaces as they go. Like a road is not a road always, and a park is not a park always. So that's something I think we have to recognize sooner than later, and kind of do away with this whole industrial revolution version of the way cities must be planned.
So I think your point right now, what you're mentioning, is adaptability. Yeah, we can plan, but in the end, the users adapt to the spaces as they see fit.
Yeah, and the more that we recognize that, the more that we will allow for these functions to happen and plan for them, because regulations, policies, all those must support that. Because say you go against the rule and you do something you're not supposed to do in a particular space, it's almost like a no. You're doing something against the system, which I think is just becoming unhealthy then. So rather than, so you can still plan and do things the way you're doing it, but to recognize and support what happens in those spaces is like, and allowing for that flexibility and adaptability itself is also very important.
Okay, so would it be, would I be correct to say that, sorry, yes, maybe I'll take your statement first. Yes.
Yeah, I would like to add also one more thing. I think now it's the time to introduce the participatory planning. It is very important aspect of planning, and I think during the previous years we lacked this very important element in planning, because we should have the opinion of people, of the end users who will be using the spaces at the end. And I think during the COVID, many examples has been appearing. It's instead not even in term of planning, but even how how we are designing our own houses. Like nobody was thinking about the gym is some it will be a very important in some time, but I think participatory planning, it is a very nice solution for it's not the solution, but it is an element of planning that we should use often in our future planning, and how we can serve the people with planning that they will use it at the end, that they will enjoy using it.
True. So
I
basically,
think
yeah.
To continue on that, basically we have been living here, we know that we know humans and how they react to spaces. We don't exactly know them, but we have seen examples and experiences, and we also know locally how they react to spaces, how they interact with these spaces. So if we're talking about planners, designers, and so on, they can extract from these examples. Yes, the public participation is important, but before even getting to the public participation, there is a lot of things that we already know. But are we implementing them? Are we trying to go deep into in discovering them more and more, and seeing what are the elements that impact more in the usage of these spaces, and are we implementing it? That is where we lack. And then I think if we really work on that, and then bring in the people as their to see their opinions, to see which options are better, and so on, it will enhance. But also I also do not encourage getting the public in early in the design stage, very early in the design stage, because I feel like first you as a planner or a designer, you have to search about them. You have to know what are the elements that would attract them, design accordingly, and then you get their input, and then you redesign if you have to. So that is extremely important.
All right. So from what I understand, it's a system. I mean, you basically create a system in place, and then you look for data. You see the response, and then you alternate your design or the system as required.
Yeah,
right?
actually, if we simplify it, it's like every project or planning project, it needs data collection first. So the data collection, it will give us the culture of the people. It will give us what are the spaces they have, what they are doing with those spaces. And after that, we will analyze the data that we gathered from the data collection phase. And after analyzing, finishing the analysis, we'll start initiate like a first, if like the architect says, the first draft of our thoughts on the space. And like Doctor said, it's not healthy to engage the people from the early stage, but it's very nice to keep them engaged, to show them their importance. Like people are they are very emotional at the end. When you give them the space, even if it's not a big space, but you engage them at least in very specific time stages on that project, it will give them the importance, and they will even they will think that they are creating the plan with you, I think. And this is what happened in many projects recently, and how people started to participate. And we saw that people are helping us more than old days. They are they're seeing only the dark side of the planning. So I think, yeah, I agree with Doctor. It is very important to know when you are engaging with the people, but I think it's also important to engage them, to give them the freedom, not the full freedom, of course, but give them the flavor that what they will be given at the end as end users.
I can tell from the discussion how serious we are, and how personal it is designing a public space, and how important it is to have these discussions, so that just so that it creates an awareness amongst the residents here, how how the process goes and what kind of steps needs to be taken to get the best outcome. And okay, our last statement for today is: while the mobility in the city has significantly dropped, there's been seen a rise in pedestrian movement in the neighborhoods. What do you think?
But I don't entirely agree or don't entirely disagree. Now, there has been an increase in the pedestrian movement in areas, but the thing is, not in all areas. In the areas that already had the infrastructure for the pedestrian movement, they saw a significant improvement in terms of the movement around them. But the areas that didn't have the infrastructure, well, there was movement, but it didn't increase as drastically compared to the areas which already were ready to receive this type of movement. They were ready in terms of safety, in terms of having the activities in place, having the pedestrian layout.
Infrastructure.
So yeah, the infrastructure was already ready to receive. So those spaces received a drastic increase in the pedestrian movement. Whereas the spaces that were not ready, they did see some improvement, because of course people are trying to get out and just to have a walk around. But it wasn't as drastic. So it was clear that people are ready to go out almost now, and they're ready to explore the spaces if the proper infrastructure is provided to them.
What do you think about it, Nasser and Shehla?
I have to agree. I'm also kind of on the fence about saying that it's overall increased, but I did see that, the places that had the infrastructure that were ready to receive people, I think those really showed their success. And I think there were people who did not have that infrastructure would go to those places that did. So literally it attracted more than maybe its own catchment
Can you
population.
mention certain examples of certain areas in town?
Yeah, actually right in Al Khawair, there's one park that was not even a park, like a parklet, between two roads, the service road and the main road. And near Bazar Sama, that was pretty much underdeveloped. It looked like it had a lot of potential, but it was always dusty. And over the whole lockdown period, they started to rejuvenate it, and it's become such a lively spot in the whole neighborhood now. And it's with lesser restrictions, and since it doesn't have any fences around, it's become quite a success. It's changed the whole feeling and mood and safety and everything of the place, because it has become, it's a proper park, and you have families coming there. Earlier it was just, you wouldn't know who was there, what kind of people are hanging around. There'd be all these weird stories you'd hear on the news. So that changed everything about it. So yeah.
Nasser, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think overall, not even the pedestrian movement, but other modes like cycling and I have never seen such a movement like this during what happened during the pandemic. For example, I will give you an example of a space. It's not it wasn't meant to be for cyclists or for people doing sports or for walking. But if you know the space of the Civil Aviation Authority building near
Yes.
to the way, this place is, I think, like a paradise now for the people with cycles. People want
Yes.
to
of all ages, actually, from kids to adults.
Yeah, and the amazing part, it's not meant to be like that at all. But people saw a place without cars that they can do their sports there, and take their families to do like to do sports with them. So I think within this time it was like there was a sudden increase, maybe not in our own neighborhoods, but in spaces like those. So even if it's not like designed or well designed for cyclists or for walking, but people find their own place to do their activities.
So I think it comes back to what Alya had mentioned, the places that were prepared and had the appropriate infrastructure, they did receive a big number of, outburst of people.
Yeah,
and
but actually that was only like a grid of roads. It wasn't designed like, I know most of them will have some medical problems there on their knees because they are doing their their sports on like roads. But at least they had found somewhere to do their activities.
That's true.
Yeah.
And to wrap things up, I would just like to ask you this: what do you, in terms of the future of public spaces, what do you think? Would we ever go back to the normal that we were used to? What do you think? What would happen to our spaces in the future, post-COVID era, or as we come in inshallah, in the beginning of 2021?
Well, if I would say like I'm not predicting it, but I'm hoping that what would happen is that instead of designing from top to bottom, instead of looking at the aerial view and designing on that level, we start designing from bottom up. So we start designing for the people, and then from there we build up our cities. It's not, I'm not saying this is going to, it's like a forecast or this is how it's going to happen. It's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time, but at least now the planners, the designers are starting to look at this element, the human element, that was almost neglected behind his car, because it was like this human element was usually going from home to work and probably to the malls. So we were planning for great roads that would provide you with ease mobility, residential areas and mall areas. So and office areas probably. So this was what we were always concerned about. Now all of a sudden, this human or this person has left his car and is starting to roam around. And since he's roaming around, I'm hoping that the next response to this would be that we start designing for him as a person, and we start designing our cities from top up. So not a forecast, but a hope.
Yeah, I mean, I have with Oman Think Urban, I think that's become like the more exciting prospect, because when we started, it was just last year talking about this, missing voice of the people when it comes to planning and any kind of urban development. So we really feel like the more we feel like we need to hurry it up, because we can see the need coming up, that people are really wanting to have a say in what can happen with their spaces, and they're much more aware of their places than they ever were before. So it's kind of like you can meet them halfway much easier than you would have maybe pre-COVID, where you would have to probably try to sell the importance of this and then get towards the next step.
True. I can attest to that. Similar with our experiences as well. The residents now are much more, they're more willing to participate in a discussion, or they're willing to share their challenges or the ideas with you now, mostly because they've experienced being stuck in one place and what it's like not being able to move around or not to enjoy the comfort that's, you know, that they could have in their own areas, in their own vicinity, instead of, you know, like you said, traveling to destination A and B for, you know, this and that, for whether it be malls or parks for kids and things like that. So I think everyone's becoming more aware in that aspect. So thank you everybody for joining us. This was really interesting, and I really thank you for taking your time. Do you have any final statements to say?
Yeah, from my side, I always say, like, we should always be like optimistic, and with great visions we have, like with Oman 2040 and other strategies, I think we have a great chances to develop very nice urban areas with a great qualities coming in future. And it is like a very nice, like, you know, when you have a plan, it's better than starting from zero. So we already have plans, we have strategies, are doing like trying to put those places with a quality into the reality. So I think we should be optimistic in this, like, in this regard.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
All right. Thank you everybody for joining me. It was really great having all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.